guys know about, of course, hot fixes. This is similar to that, but it's actually not as much fixes all the time as it is our ability to make sweeping changes to things without having to reboot the server. That's really important for a beta test. The ability for Ben and I to make changes to the crafting system, to the item system, to do whatever we need to do and not have to tell you folks, hey, yeah, you guys got to sign out and wait for all the servers to start up again. Now we won't need to do that for a lot of key things. And we want to expand that functionality even further. Again, more than hot fixes, and a pretty useful thing for beta tests. Bots using abilities. So one of the best things we can do, as you folks know, to test the new ability system is have our bots actually use the ability system. And that's what Mark got hooked up this week. Again, not the most exciting abilities, but they work. And they work really well. They work so well that Mark got a 3-time improvement on the number of bots that we can have on one of our bot servers. And that's really helpful because not only does it save us money, because one of the things we told you folks was the big bot battles was quite expensive per hour. So now we've just cut the price significantly. It also cuts down the difficulty of spinning up these tests. The surprising end of the week fix on our Skyball. So one of the things I've said before, that we want our Skyball to look really good, and the stars and other things that will be floating around in the sky, we want to look cool. So we got a fix from Dave on that. So that's going to help in a lot of things. It's also part of the, hey, we need more light during the night phase of the game, and not just from artificial light sources, but actually from light sources like the moons, like the stars and other things, to try to make the game feel more immersive, as well as to add, the strategy and tactics that we've always said are associated with the day-night cycle.
Do you think swimming will be possible and rewarding in CU?
Not in plate armor. That just won't go well. I see a lot of sinking, in the future. But yes, swimming will be something that is part of the game. Water is part of the game, and so the ability potentially to swim around through potential hazards and deliver certain things, I think will be kind of helpful. But again, not in plate, just a safety warning. We've never taken the attitude with you folks of, it'll be done when it's done. That's just not, I think, the most respectful way to treat our backers. So we're doing our best. The good news is, and I was discussing this with the producers this morning, for the first time ever, we have 2 senior programmers who are dedicated to one thing and one thing only, and that's gameplay. That's it. We're not pulling them onto other tasks. We're not putting them on tech. They are working on gameplay. So, I want to give you, I'd love to say that, yes, we're going to have beta in a week, 6 weeks. I know it won't be 60 weeks. I know it won't be the end of the year. I know it will be well before then. I will give you a date once the new animation system is in and the new VFX system is in. And by the way, the improved one. And by the way, it's not in the top 10-ish list because it didn't drop yet, but I talked about this on the forum, so I'll say it here now. One of the things that Dave and George have been working on is improving the VFX system. Well, they got a little bit, especially George, a little bit of an improvement out of it. So it started at a 6x improvement, and it just grew from there. So, yeah, really good. Mike and George and Dave were having a discussion about that yesterday, and Mike started to smile at times. He doesn't smile a lot. That's Mike. Well, he smiles about some things, usually not until the particle effect, not until his particle effect is actually done, and even then, as I told you before about him, he's always, critical of his own work, and that goes all the way back to even the pre-Mythic days. I've known him that long, and when he was discussing stuff with George and Dave, there were some smiles out of him. So that made me very happy. So I am looking forward to seeing that drop in the game either next week or the week after. And when we then hook that up to the abilities that the bots are now running around with, that's going to give us one heck of a test. And at that point, we'll be getting very close to giving you folks, a real date.
Hornix has a one-word question. Tree houses?
Yes. From the beginning, I have some asks, just for my own personal, enjoyment, and there are very few of them, and I try to keep them as simple as possible. And that's one of them. Not the auroras in particular, but to have a really awesome, night sky. The ability to sit back and, as a player, and just look at the sky and see some cool things happen every so often. It makes the world feel more immersive, less like a game and more like a world. And that's one of the things we've said from the beginning we want to create. So yes, expect differences.
Could you talk more about what mechanics you have in mind to keep players of CU realm players first, and not niche playstyle subcultures that largely don't give a rat's behind about the realm?
Oh, well, the simplest one, and this was absolutely something that we, do we believe in like 100+%, and that's the whole realm rewards. Yes, you can certainly just worry about yourself if you want in the game. You can't stop people from doing that. But so much of what you get is going to be from your realm. Yes, your actions count, obviously, quite a lot. But it is not a direct one-to-one with, I killed 5 people, therefore I got 5 swords, or 5 dead people worth of experience. You get more than that, but you get that from your realm. The best way for the realm to succeed is to work together, mainly because of the rewards. And so yes, I'm sure there's going to be not perfect cooperation, because that's humanity. On the other hand, you guys are incentivized to work together. We've tried to remove, and will continue to try to remove, any idea that we have or have in the have in the future that makes it less, or gives players a good reason for less cooperation between each other. So that's one of the ways. There are many others, and certainly we've talked about how the crafting system works, a little bit about how the depths works, how about about things as simple as even mines, that if they're on general land, you can't just take it for yourself. Other people can share in it. So there's a lot of things that we're trying to do to encourage cooperation between players, but also to avoid fostering reasons for people not to cooperate. A good example, again, is the mines, where you have group mines, where you have multiple people, lots of people, who can work on our equivalent of nodes or bubbles. And it won't be that, hey, you get 3 taps or 4 taps and it goes away, which really doesn't encourage sharing in any which way, shape, or form. They're going to last longer, a lot longer. And so it's things like that, and again, a lot of little things as well, that I hope will foster more cooperation, between people. And the obvious things as well as, if you defend, your neighbor's house, that's kind of important. And, we talked about, even from the beginning, when it comes to keep trading, where defense and, being the folks who stick it out wasn't rewarded. Well, we're going to reward it in this game. And one of the things I've always said to you folks, and I say it here, is that I'm not a believer in silver bullets. And, I just don't. And, you need a basket of things. You need a lot of different things that can help feed into, hey, what makes this a more cooperative feeling game? Hey, what makes this world feel more immersive? That's how I look at things. What we are trying to avoid, obviously, is making something that is unwieldy for players, but on the other hand, gives you more customization, gives you the ability to, make your character look very different. I mean, it'd be silly to go like, hey, I've got one different slot for each of my fingers, when you make up a glove. That's dumb. On the other hand, building out your head so you can have multiple pieces, that makes sense. So that's the sort of stuff we've been working on. At the end of the day, what we don't want to have is a one-to-one correlation with day-night in the world, because that's just dumb, for our kind of game, where we're saying to everybody, hey, you folks, in Europe, you can play on our servers, because we don't have realm-locked, country-locked, servers. And so, people who would be in off-time slots, from the U.S., would be at a disadvantage, and potentially a big disadvantage. So, one-to-one ain't going to happen. Is it going to happen in the same way as the real world works, where you have, X amount of hours of night, X amount of hours of, true day, and then, some of the periods in between? Probably not either. We want to look at a day-night cycle that really makes sense for the game. And for the game, I mean for the players. We want night. Night's important. But we don't want night so important that people go, I don't want to log on, because I'm going to be logging on, in the middle of the night right now, and that just sucks because blah, blah, blah. We don't want that. So whatever the number is that works for, our backers and for us, that's the number we're going to put in. For me, I really don't care as long as we have a good, amount of nighttime, because, things get a little more interesting at night. We are building our API through Chromium that you guys can, already do things. Our mod squad can do things. So that's there. In terms of restricted data, absolutely. In beta, we're not going to be restricting a lot. When we go live, we will. That's just the way it has to be. There'll be data that we won't want to send down to the client. We've talked about, for example, nighttime. Perfect segue from the last question. That if we're sending all the data, for example, of hey, there's 50 people, but you can't see them, but we send it to the client anyway. Of course, some intrepid souls are going to packet sniff or look in memory or do other things and figure that out.
Will CU allow us to fish, cook, and do animal husbandry for money loot purposes?
Yes, and isn't that third one banned in many countries? I'm not sorry. Sorry. So look, would I love to have some of that stuff in the game? Sure, absolutely. It's not terribly challenging, but right now, when you're as behind as we are in beta, everything is challenging. So I don't want to promise anything that could delay the game, even a week, and certainly no more than that, because that would be bad. We have an obligation to deliver beta. That's what we're working on doing. Once we do that, once potentially we get more engineers and have time to do stuff like that, I love it. I fished a bunch in WoW. I don't do it a lot in other games, but I do it every so often just for fun. And so having some, downtime options where you just don't want to go into RVR, you want to feel more, again, like a world, not a game, and, maybe your property is on water. So having something like that, that would be really cool. I think it is helpful, not necessary. Same with, cooking and, animal husbandry as well. Unlike the ability system, where there was a lot of time we spent on it where you folks couldn't see anything. I mean, nothing. You can already see the first pass of the animation system in. And when Andrew gets back next week, I know he's got a bunch of things on his plate to improve and to add. So this is going to be something you should hopefully seeing improvement on a weekly basis.
Any chance the world will hide secret knowledge, like some ancient or powerful components?
Oh, absolutely. Oh my God, absolutely. The depths is an interesting place. So yeah, lots of hidden stuff. The team's expansion has been on the programming side. We certainly haven't added any new artists lately. Is it possible we would add one or two? Possibly. But we're getting to the point, or we will be getting to the point soon, that we'd be better off outsourcing, simply because that will be faster and when we launch, and hopefully we're as successful as we would like to be, then we can look at adding more, artists to the team permanently.
Will all crafters be able to build and use traps, or will they need to specialize in those at the cost of the other professions, armor crafting, alchemy, etc.?
So that's the, still the $64 million question, or in our case, the $4.5, million question. So one of the things with crafters, and we've been really clear about this from the beginning, is that we weren't looking to break you down into specializations, not in the traditional way. So, if I say here now that there's no chance that will happen, I could end up being a liar, and I don't want to do that, or being wrong, certainly, because I certainly believe that's not the way we want to go. In theory, you should be able, we hope, to do both, things to help you directly in RVR, which trap making would be one of them, as well as more pure crafter things. I think we can do that without having to, fall back on the very tried and true system of, hey, pick, these, the equivalent of spec lines, and, use them to level up your character. But we'll have to see. But I will say that this is one of the areas I would absolutely default to giving the crafters more, and rather than limiting them more, because it's important for our crafters or for our players, as I've said, that if you want crafter players, that if you want to be involved in RVR, we're going to encourage you to do so. We're not going to encourage you by going, well, if you don't do that, you don't level, because that's not encouragement. That's more like the cattle prod. But I also do want to say to players that, hey, look, we know that you may want to be your basic crafter, your basic creator, builder, however we're going to have to separate, these terms. And then say, but if you also participate in RVR, for example, the RVR skills might not count against your, progression points, even though that's not the term, we're using. So we might say, hey, great, trap making, trap setting, siege weapons, and all that could be a separate, line, so you could do both. Because I want to encourage crafters to do both. Again, encourage in the good way, not the bad way. We're going the traditional route. There will not be one giant server. I've spoken about that constantly, as guys like Francis, Board talks about on, massively in MMO or anywhere that subject comes up, our forums as well. It's not that I have anything against them in theory, but I do know that they bring more problems than they, solve for a game like ours. So, more traditional, higher concurrent count than, for example, we had with Dark Age or Warhammer, not one giant server. For a host of reasons. Again, I shouldn't say again because I didn't discuss this yet. It's not a technical thing, not really, because you can get around it. Obviously, Elder Scrolls did a really good job with that. Grats on Matt, and Eve, of course. But for our kind of game, for an RVR focused game, we're knowing your community, meaning your whole server, your whole realm. That's kind of important. And even when you go out and fight the bad guys, and gals, you want to get to know their names. You want to know who you killed. You want to see them on the battlefield again. Or if you killed them, they want to see you again. And if you're trying to do that in a massive server where people come and go, from your instance, from your world within that server, you're not going to have that same kind of, feeling. On the other hand, if you build it in such a way that their servers or the instances within the server or the zones or whatever, I forget what the Elder Scrolls, term for that is. Well, if it's so heavily locked, then it's no different than, the current server ideas. So might as well stick with what we know works, and, based on certainly the history of some of the servers on Dark Age, I think it's one that will work very well for our backers.
When will we have info on the crafter class, not the crafting system?
During beta. It's possible, though highly unlikely, that we'll have the crafter class all good to go for Beta 1. We talked about that we're going to be attaching the abilities onto every player to make it easier to test. But we'll see. Anything can happen over the next few months. We said the same thing all along. We're waiting, until everything is final, where the animation system is final, before we outsource anything. It doesn't make any sense to do it now. Like 0 sense. This is the sort of thing that is changing almost on a daily basis between Scott and Andrew, and obviously other people get input as well. So until that's final, there is 0 reason to do any of that kind of outsourcing. Same with VFX, right? Because we don't know just how many particles we get to play with in a given scene. And by scene, I mean not the technical term, but the idea of hundreds or even thousands of people running around, in a battle at the same time. So that's all the sort of stuff we've got to figure out before we can do any outsourcing, as well as give the budget that the outsourcers get to spend, whether it is on animation, whether it is, on effects. I don't want to say I can't imagine a scenario that we're not on Steam, because I certainly can, but I would expect to be on Steam. I mean, it's the #1, digital distribution platform. They have some, obviously some great games over there, and certainly they have market share. So I would like to see us there for launch. I have no plans. We have no plans to make it an early access title. I think that would end in tears, quite frankly, because you folks who are backing our game, you folks who have played MMOs before, having you guys and gals come in and test the game and help us develop is one thing. As we know from a bunch of early access games on Steam, the community is not as forgiving, and this isn't because they're bad people, not hardly, but it's a different paradigm. You guys know what you're getting into. You guys and gals who signed up, whether to back the game from the Kickstarter or signing up now, you know the state. On early access, that could devolve, and we don't need to do that, nor do we need the cash from a quick, hey, get up on early access and let's get a whole bunch of people and hope that we keep most of the money and don't have to refund a bunch of people. So I would love to be up there when we're live, but I don't expect us certainly to do an early access title. We've talked about hitboxes in the past, that it doesn't make any sense for a large character to swing at a tiny character and connect just like he would on a character his size, like the giant. On the other hand, for something much smaller than a giant to miss in the traditional swoosh kind of way when you have a target that big is also kind of silly. So yes, you're going to have to connect with it in terms of controlling your swing. We certainly have talked about and showed attacks that you decide where you want to aim them. For example, a giant who says, I want to go for a high attack on a Lucapan is going to have a much harder time because he is bigger. On the other hand, a Lucapan who tries to go for a headshot for the giant, good luck. Whether we'll have any West Coast servers, if we spin everything up on instances, if there's demand, I'd say the same thing to our West Coasters is, I said to our, folks in Europe, if there's enough demand for West Coast servers, and since we only have to spin up instances versus the old days of, we got to be at somebody's colo, and then have somebody to maintain the colo. As long as we don't have to do that, I'm happy to spin up instances, in different places in different countries. It's really up to the demand. Small group RVR is absolutely part of our plan. We have talked about that. Since you referenced Camelot, of course, there's the great joy that many small groups had at being able to take out a larger group. We want to see that as well. We've talked about how we do want to make the large-scale furballs, less attractive to players in terms of their ability to succeed in the game. And so I think that will help encourage slightly smaller groups, because there's almost nobody who wants to see large scale, groups just wandering around the world in a circle and never, encountering each other. That's not what we're looking for here. That's not why you folks have backed us. So, we're going to be doing a lot of things to try to combat that. We don't want to eliminate that, because once you say that, you're going to be wrong, because you can never totally eliminate it. But are we going to want to make it less optimal? We've said that right from the beginning. We want small groups fighting. Now, do we want small groups working together at times? Absolutely. But that's a lot different than the, again, the roving, wandering groups that never seem to, reach each other, but reach undefended keeps or reach undefended places of power, and succeed in that way. That's not what we want to encourage. That's not fun for most people. When you have crafting as an auxiliary skill to your character, you can assume that a lot of people are going to pick it up. If you look at WoW and you look at so many other games, you're encouraged to add crafting. We wanted to build something different. We wanted to build something really unique for crafters. Now, you are specialized in a sense that because you can't be great at everything. If you want to be the best at one of the, steps in crafting, you can't be good at the other ones. You can't be number one at the other ones. So there is some specialization there, but it's specialization that you choose as a player. You're building your own class. Now, will this work? I have no idea. I think it will. I think it will be really encouraging for our crafters and for people who like crafters, that they don't have to make the choice of, but I really wanted to do a lot of things, and I don't care if I'm great at all of them. I just really want to do a bunch of the things, and I want to do them well. Fabulous. You can do that with the system. On the other hand, for the people who say, no, I want to be the best sword maker in the realm, and I want to be known for that, you can certainly be one of the best, because there'll be other people there who will try to be as good as you are. But that will take time, and that will come with sacrifice. And one of the things you sacrifice there, obviously, the ability to be great in other lines. And the difference is here, and this is why it's so important to keep this in mind, is that unlike most games, and using WoW as a perfect example because it's a great game in so many ways, it's so easy to craft in that game. You just dump mats, on your characters, and off you go crafting. That's not how our system works. You have to, be willing to be a dedicated crafter to succeed, because things take time. Making items takes time. Purifying items takes time. So that means you have choices to make. You can't do everything. You can't just say, hey, guild, dump all these mats on me and I'm going to be great at all these things, or I'm going to be very good at all these things. You won't have the time to do that. It won't work that way. So, there is specialization, but it's specialization that you, the player, get to choose, not us, the designers. Our big islands are in and working great. So we've got a 32-kilometer map, and it is just fabulous. It is so big. It's running so well. We are very, very pleased. I mentioned earlier in the top 10 about the bot progress, which was huge for us this week. The improvements were great, and once they're hooked up, with the new abilities and effects and all the working animations, that will be even better. So that's really good. We'll have some of the bots running around hopefully this weekend as well. We've got the improved VFX system is getting really close to being dropped in. So, it's one of those weeks where it's just like we took some steps forward and almost got some other things in that will be going in next week and the week after that. So, I'm trying not to get excited, but certainly the improved VFX system and the continued pass and improvements on the animation system are just things I've been waiting for a while, and I'm really excited. Really, really excited about that. Yeah, good week. I wish you folks all the best for your weekend, and hopefully I'll see you in the game this weekend. And if not, again, have a good weekend, and as always, thanks for the support.